Hi, I'm Scott Sisil. I'm the product lead for the Runtime program inside of the Tanzu Application Platform. And I'm here today to talk to you about the Tanzu Application Platform and why we believe it's a superior multi-cloud developer experience on Kubernetes. So as we kind of get to the point now where Kubernetes is becoming kind of the default container runtime layer inside of or on the cloud. And that's great for that consistency and that consistent kind of experience across that. But what we're seeing is it's a very complex ecosystem, and there's also a lot of developer complexity around adopting Kubernetes. You bring a lot of operational concepts to developers to have to kind of grapple with when they're developing an application. When a developer wants to just focus on their business logic, that's a lot of overhead. And we talk about using all the Kubernetes tooling to get your application to production, that adds another level of complexity. So when we look at what we want to do to not only simplify the complexity around kind of like the developer process, but also making it easier to get those applications they're developing to production, we want to pave that path to production. We want to make it easy to get code to prod, continuously deploy it, and then deploy it across a variety of SaaS and on-prem environments. Additionally, we want to bring those best practices for operations and security into that development lifecycle, and then also to kind of pave that path to production. When we look at these two problems, these are the kind of the two core foundations of things that we're looking at. So when we look at like those two core problems, that's what we're trying to solve here for Tanzu Application Platform. Tanzu Application Platform is an Appleware platform for a better developer experience on Kubernetes. We want to unlock developer productivity, build a rapid yet sustainable path to production, and allow you to coordinate the work of the development and ops. So when we talk about this, really providing a set of defaults and templates that developers can use that are defined by their operators and platform operators and security teams to quickly get up and running and deploy their application in a secure path to production. This should allow them to create a rapid path to production, but in a sustainable, repeatable way that can be scaled out across clouds. And by bringing a lot of those concepts from the developer, from the security and operations point of view, closer to the developer and part of that development lifecycle, but abstracted away in the developer complexity, they can just focus on their business logic, but the operations team can be confident that when they deploy it to their Kubernetes layer, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, or it's on-prem or on a SaaS cloud, that it's going to meet their standards.
I get a lot of confusion around Tanzu Application Platform, and I think the predecessor or the precursor was Tanzu Application Services.
Yes, application service, yeah.
What's the difference?
So Tanzu Application Service is that kind of cohesive monolith paths that you're looking at, where Tanzu Application Platform is a set of composable components that create this kind of path to production on top of Kubernetes. Key difference there between Kubernetes being the consistent Kubernetes control plane under our Kubernetes layer underneath, whereas Tanzu Application Service is built more on kind of like VM type of technology and kind of the Cloud Foundry model. So a key component here is with Tanzu Application Platform, you can have those set of defaults and those set of like components that we give to you out of the box. So similar to that, like, hey, here's our opinion, run with it. But the composability and the templating and the configurability of the platform allow you to go in and peel back to the layer that allows you to go down to the layer that you want customization. So say we give you a default CI/CD pipeline. But say you have established Jenkins pipelines that you want to use. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to use that with our platform. So we allow you to plug those type of things into our platform. Additionally, from a runtime perspective, if you want to use our serverless abstractions that come out of the box based on Knative, great. But there's no reason you shouldn't be able to peel that back and use Kubernetes underneath the hood to kind of use, like for instance, a Kubernetes deployment instead of Knative service for your deployment. So we want to give those developers, operators, and security personnel the configurability to create a unique path to production on the systems that they want to use for their developers.
Super helpful. So TAS, this is how you build applications. TAP, this is how you can build applications.
Yeah, so yeah, think of like, yeah, TAS is like that kind of like use the system to build your application. TAP is that part of it too, but then also the ability to kind of configure that platform to meet.
If I decide that I want to use RabbitMQ for messaging at some point, I can switch it out and TAP versus in TAS, whatever the message queue is, that's the message.
Yeah, but you still get the developer abstraction, the developer productivity gains with TAP as well.
Maybe this is my lack of understanding, but actually when we talk to developers, okay, so they have a totally different mind. So they don't think about VMware at all.
Exactly.
So if you are already a Tanzu, so VMware customer, then you can impose something to the developers, including then you can show them that there is this additional option. But probably they are already working with totally different tools, mostly open source tools, AWS, GCP, and all the others. So they don't really care. So why they should care about listening to, to VMware in the first place? Because they can already do their work, and there are several tools already available.
Yeah. So this is kind of like the marriage of the operator perspective and developer perspective into a cohesive experience. Whereas the developers can still keep using their preferred tooling or their kind of like frameworks and languages they want to use, and they can deploy it to the cloud target that they want to, but you can bring some of those operator opinions and those templates and those productivity gains of bringing some of those operational controls as part of just the platform itself. Introduce that to the developers to have a much more consistent, scalable path to production across any cloud. So instead of being like, oh, I have to use AWS's tools, or I have to use Azure's tools, or I have to use GCP's tools, or I have to use VMware's tools, TAP's goal is to provide a unifying experience across all those clouds that creates that kind of like inner loop to outer loop path to production with a consistent kind of secure supply chain across those things. We'll get into more detail of what that means. I threw a bunch of kind of like terms out there into that kind of the demo portion of that. But does that answer kind of your questions?
Yes and no. I mean, there is in all of this, and again, if you are already deep in the VMware ecosystem, I can get that maybe this comes for free or almost free as an additional component to the entire platform. But actually, if I want to develop application that are really portable and everything, so Kubernetes, so why don't I stick with traditional tools and then I deploy them on whatever they,
Well, I think it's like a lot of those things is like trying to like focus the developer experience so you can only have to focus on just your application code, not the path to production and not the like destination and the security concerns, the operational controls, and baking that into your platform. Like as a developer, do I really need to know all the concepts and like the nuance of Kubernetes if I just need to focus on my application code? You should be able to abstract that away and have it consistent across whatever cloud. So you don't have to take that into account. You don't have to take into account Azure's or Amazon's opinions into your application code. That's just a byproduct of the platform, abstracting that away. And then you can just focus on your application code and move it across wherever it makes sense to run it from an operations perspective.
Okay.
All right, so when I move on to the next concept here, I talk about an Appleware platform. So this is kind of the concepts that I was talking, just kind of touching on. When you're looking at some of the more just like adopting Kubernetes as a platform as itself to run your application versus an Appleware platform that TAP is, you have to bake in a lot of these operational concerns and make your application more platform aware. We feel that an Appleware platform leverages a lot of the patterns that we leverage in kind of that we saw with the Spring Java framework it allows developers to focus on just defining their app requirements. And it enables a shift left model with no burden to developer. Well, by shift left, meaning operations and security concerns now are part of the platform of that developer experience by default. It's not a byproduct or an afterthought or something I have to add in as after I develop my application. It just comes with the platform itself.
Can you define some of those requirements that you're talking about here, just for the record? Like, what kind of requirements are you talking about that you'd be defining?
Yeah, so you're thinking about like a security vulnerabilities or like a CVE that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
If you created your own Docker image and built that out, and you did that, you scaled that out over across hundreds of developers across the organization, and they all have their own bespoke Docker images, and they built those out and put them into production. Patching that's a nightmare, and you're not even sure if you might not even know like what made it into that container image that's running in a platform. When you're using consistent tooling like that are part of TAP and things like build packs and Tanzu build service, those vulnerabilities, that consistent build and secured build patterns make it into your application by default. And also additionally, things like security scanning and making sure that things are configured correctly to run at a production scale versus a developer having to configure that, run it through a pipeline, and then it has to go through and an operator has to configure it. That's all just baked in on the what we're calling a secure supply chain. I kind of touched on these last 2 points here when I was just talking about this, but having the full portability from development to production and making sure that that inner loop experience and the outer loop experience and the path to production that takes you there to a production environment is consistent and is baked into the application design from inception. And then this automatically requires developers to inherit platform best practices because those are automatically applied via the development workflow for the application. So this is kind of like the quick overview of TAP, but what I want to do is hand it off now to Ryan and Aaron to provide a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of these concepts that we want to showcase with Tanzu Application Platform.